Okay, let's go. It's time for Be Picked. When you're ready to move from clicks to clients, learn to be picked.
Welcome to another episode of Be Picked, the podcast for small professional service providers, where we help you build your business and grow your business. And we teach you all the things that you need to know that nobody taught you in professional school because they don't talk about marketing in professional school. I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky. Today, we have a guest, Scott Winthizer. He is the CEO and founding partner of Lightburn, which is a Milwaukee-based digital customer experience agency that he co-founded in 1998. With 28 plus years in digital and e-commerce, he has founded and sold multiple e-commerce businesses and even had a documentary screened at Sundance. In Lightburn's early days, he built a custom CMS and e-commerce platform from scratch because the tools didn't exist yet. Today, Lightburn's 20-plus person team helps mid-sized organizations, especially manufacturers, with web design, development, CMS strategy, digital marketing, and e-commerce. Scott's approach is straightforward. Find the right size solution, not the most expensive one. And I love that, and that is how I want to kick off our podcast. So, first off, Scott, welcome to the show, and let's dive in. Where did you come up with the whole concept and understanding that you want to focus on the right size solution? Because we all know the more money you put, the better you're going to get, right?
Yeah. It took us a while to get there. I think as we started, we've been around 28 years. So obviously at the beginning, bigger always felt better. But over time, we saw that more and more companies were they thought that spending more meant that they were going to get better results. And we just saw waste after waste after waste. And we actually realized that, a lot of times companies were overspending on features and they were underspending on strategy and implementation. So they were just trying to throw as much out there as they possibly could. And spending more actually often resulted in worse results because they didn't have a focused strategy. So we're really trying to help companies of all sizes spend for just what they need and then add to it over time instead of trying to solve it all with one giant purchase up front.
Right. Well, I'm sure that the listeners are glad to hear that because I know a lot of them are working with, budgets that are not unlimited, and they're trying to get the best they can for what they can afford to do. And they realize that you have to spend something, but you have to spend it wisely, not just
Right.
throwing it. So there's so much that comes from that when we talk about sort of the right size solution. So because most of our listeners are going to be small professional service providers, maybe a independent person, maybe a group of 10 or less, something along those sizes. When we think about right size solution for someone who maybe has currently no social media, no web presence, no nothing, maybe they have a static website that they built a couple of years ago that just sits there.
Mm-hmm.
What should they even be thinking about when we talk about right size for someone like that?
Well, I think the first thing is really trying to figure out what the outcome is. What are you trying to get your potential visitors to your site, let's say your website, to do once they get there? And really focus on, is the content that you have on the site resonating with them? Making sure that it's very clear that they can self-identify themselves when they get there. So you want a potential visitor to come to your site and realize immediately that, yes, that's the firm for me. They understand my pain points. They understand my problems. And then I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make especially when they're first starting on a website, is this concept that more is better. And so they try to throw out messaging for every possible audience and they try to put it all in one place. And it ends up being nothing to everybody instead of something to your target audience. So starting with less, starting with a really focused message and trying to build it over time as you're seeing what's working and what isn't, we find is really the most effective way to start. And it's usually the most cost effective.
So right there in that answer, there's a lot going on because, you can look at websites out there that have what people traditionally have. they've got a page that has, if they're a lawyer, this is the name of my law firm, and here's our cool logo or whatever, and maybe our address and a phone number. And then they'll have an about section, and they have a picture of the attorney, and this is about me, this is where I went to school, and this is what I, did, and so on and so forth. And then maybe they'll have, some small section about a practice area. We practice bankruptcy law and in these types of courts, and it's really important to have a good bankruptcy lawyer, and that's about all they say about it. And then how to contact us. So there's a website, we're set, put it out there, we're going to get clients coming in the door. What are they missing?
They're missing the pain that you were relieving for their potential client. So, if I were going to a law firm's website, I might be interested in, some case history, some case studies, but not thousands of them, not hundreds of them. I don't want a massive amount of it. But ultimately, I want to know what that experience is going to be like working with the lawyer, because I'm not a lawyer. I want it to be as easy as possible. So I want to know that you can help me solve my pain, and you understand what if it's bankruptcy, obviously you can identify with what my business is currently going through and what pains we have, how you're going to help us, and that you understand it, and then what that actual experience working with your firm is actually going to be like. That's what's important to me. It's not, law schools are important, and your about is important, but really making sure that the firm understands my pain points and how you're going to help me as your potential customer. To me, that's a lot more important. Of like, I can identify that, yes, this is the agency, this is the law firm for me, and I'm going to sign up and reach out and get started on the process because they understand where I am.
So I get what you're saying, but how do they do that? Do they just write a paragraph that says, I understand your pain, we're good for you? Do they have to have blog articles? Do they have testimonials? Like, how do they get that message across?
Well, that's a very good question. So a little bit of all of that, I think, but the biggest thing is wording it in a way that isn't for the law firm itself. It's for the customer. So the mistake that we see a lot of, especially professional services, make is that they're speaking in a way that makes sense to them because they're professionals. They're a professional lawyer. They understand all the lawyer speak. They understand all. Your clients may not, right? Because if they did, they probably wouldn't be coming to hire you in the first place. So less is more, I think, in a lot of ways, of just trying to not overwhelm people with trying to show everything you're capable of and all the different areas of law that you practice and all the, it becomes overwhelming. And so I think having just a very short, concise, why you're different than other firms, how you're going to make the experience pain-free, and, in a sentence or two, and really trying to just get enough content in front of them to take the next step. You're not trying to educate them on everything that you know about law. You're just trying to get enough of a um, identification so that they understand, yes, they're a capable law firm. They've, they have a couple of examples on testimonials from people that I may have heard of or companies I may have heard of. And that's enough for me to get started, click the contact button or whatever the call to action is, and move on.
Okay. All right. So on this concept of sort of the right size solution, somebody is listening to this podcast and they hear what you're saying, and they say, oh wow, yeah, I really do need to update my website because I don't have any of that type of stuff, but I don't know, how to do it, or who to go to. But my friend, my colleague, they just redid their website, so they know a guy that can do a website because everybody knows a guy. And so I call the guy because he's the guy because everybody knows him.
Yeah.
And he looks at my website and he says, oh my God, wow, woo, you gotta do this and this. And here's a proposal for, we gotta build out the Rolls Royce here because you're just not hitting it. And he gives me all these things that I need to be doing. I'm curious for you. Can you walk us through an example of a client who was about to overspend on their, digital presence that you were able to kind of bring back to sort of this right size concept?
Yeah. So we have a client that has a lot of um, they were about to spend a bunch of money on a pretty large CMS platform. It has all kinds of marketing automation tools and all this great stuff that was going to take their pretty sizable contact list and turn it into, leads constantly. So they were going to spend on all these features. And as we were working with the client, we realized very quickly that they were mistaking buying all of those features for their CMS tool, their website platform tool, as having them fully implemented. What they weren't accounting for was all the effort it would take to actually keep all of that stuff moving. So what we did instead is we convinced them, instead of spending all that money on a license, spend more money on, in their case, it was spending more money on translating content into additional languages, which is something that they kind of knew they needed to do for a while. It's not work that people ever enjoy. Usually if you're creating your bulk of your content in English and that's really the only language you speak, the idea of moving on to providing additional languages gets a little, overwhelming. So they push it off. So we convinced them to spend more money on what we call localized content or translated content. So now it is available in, I think it was 3 or 4 languages total. Because a lot of their audience, English wasn't that first language. So by doing that, they spent less money up front. They provided more content for people that actually needed it. And the number of leads they were getting went up dramatically because now they're offering, they're increase their market. Essentially, they're not forcing their users to have to respond or have to identify with them in English as a primary language. So the number of leads went up, and their total expense of what they thought they were spending on what they thought they were going to see benefit from, which was all this marketing automation, was way. The cost was a lot lower, and the results were a lot.
Yeah, and that certainly brings up a particular point here, which is, if you're going to put your time and effort into building appropriate websites and appropriate content, and then you actually get the call, answer the phone. I cannot
Right,
tell
yeah,
you how
right.
many professional service offices that I call, and you can't get a person. And if you do get a person, which is rare, um, it's just an answering service person who knows nothing about your business, who knows nothing about anything, and all they can do
Mhm.
is take a message. And so they take the message, and then guess what? You never get a call back. Maybe a
Yeah,
couple days later. Maybe I've had it where it's been weeks later. I get a call back, and it's like, I don't even remember calling this person. Guess what? That caller, as soon as they hung up the phone, they dialed the very next person on their list.
yeah.
That's
No,
how it works.
that's a great point. And we used to work with a number of smaller electricians a few years ago, and it was the same thing. They constantly wanted to spend more money on putting more stuff on their website about things that they knew how to do and things that they could be doing for people. And we realized that we started tracking phone calls through. There's ways of publishing phone numbers on your website that you can track how many calls people are getting, and the number of calls was significantly higher than what the electricians were reporting as leads. And the reason for that is they didn't have anybody in the office answering the phone, like you said. So instead of spending more money on the website, they should be spending more money on, to your point of, you have the lead traffic. If you're not doing anything with it, you're just wasting more money on more leads you're not responding to.
Right. Right. Yeah, that always kills me. But at least they tell me that my call is very important to them. And it's so important that they have nobody to answer the phone and they don't get back to you. But it's
Yeah,
important.
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday. Yeah,
Well, we have that unusually high call volume 24/7.
right.
Um,
Yeah, no,
all
that's a
right.
great. That's something we're pretty good at. Obviously, that's not part of what our agency does. Is trying to staff your team for hiring a phone call. But when we find points like that, I think it's very important that, like, you're spending money in the right place. That it doesn't make sense to keep putting energy into generating leads you're not responding to.
Right. Right. So, um, another thing that you were talking about when you were talking about the website example is, most professional service providers, at least the ones that typically would listen to this podcast, they are localized. They serve a local community from where they are. Most of them are not doing national, based things. And they'll put up a website though, and they don't put anything in there that really kind of focuses it on local. That they're trying to advertise to anybody and everybody everywhere. And what good is it if you're, if you're licensed in New York and you're trying to advertise to people in Mississippi? You're not licensed there. What are you going to do there? So are there things that people can or should do when they're thinking about their website or other web presence that helps them to get more focus on a local market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're really focusing on a very, small enough market, the content on your website should make it very obvious that you're in that market, that is the market that you care about. You can do that through simple photography, skyline, or whatever of um, something from your region. And then also on your ad spending. So if you're spending ads on trying to drive traffic to that you're not spending ads on, the state next door, or to your point, across the country. Make sure you're really focused on the area that matters, and position yourself as somebody that's part of that community, and not just trying to serve that community as one of many.
Right. And, so I guess that translates also into, let's say you delve into the social media world and you do a YouTube video or something.
Hmm.
You know, there's a difference between, um, you know, getting a DUI in Washington, D.C. and getting a DUI in Virginia, for example, because different places have different laws and it may not be the same type of defense needed or the same type of rules that the police need to follow, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you're doing a video about DUIs versus DUIs in Washington, D.C., you're going to capture a different market depending on how you, phrase it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And don't be. I think it's easy for a small firm to try to hide that they're focused on a small area. And I would highly recommend you make that a benefit. You make that a point of pride in your service, and not trying to pretend like you're, this giant national law firm that has 400 offices or whatever. You're not really competing with those firms, so don't pretend to.
right, right. Right. So let's do a little bit of diagnosing here for a second. Let's say that you've got a firm, small firm, they have a website, they built it a couple years ago because they had a
Mhm.
guy, and they come to you and they say, we're not getting calls, we're not getting interaction, we're not getting anything from our website, we're not getting the leads or the inquiries. So if you take a look at their website, give us maybe like the top three things you would check to see what might be going on.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would put myself in the shoes of your best clients. So go to your website, pretend that you're visiting as one of your best clients that you already have, and try to feel like, does the content on the website identify with them, or are you actually trying to serve a slightly different audience, or are you trying to serve too many audiences? And really try to go through your site as, okay, I'm from our best client, and I'm trying to reevaluate the firm, and how much does that content identify with them, and really start there. I think you can find a lot of great information about, if you just put yourself literally in your client's shoes of, would they sign up for us now if they were landing on our webpage for the first time today? And then the other thing I think that people overlook is just talking to their existing clients as well. So find your best clients. You probably have a good relationship with a number of them, and talk to them. If they were trying to find your firm today, what would they look for? How would they search for it? Where would they search for it? Would they, what channels are they looking on? Doesn't do you any good to be on Instagram if all of your clients are trying to find your firm on LinkedIn. So interview your clients. They'll give you a wealth of information on um, things you're just not thinking of because you're too close to it, and try to figure out, okay, our clients all say they would search for us through friends on LinkedIn, for example. Um, then put your energy there, and then if they're using keywords or phrases or search terms that you hadn't thought of, go back to your site and say, okay, if does this website answer those searches? Does it identify with how they think of our firm?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's where I would start. And then if, when you don't, if you're identifying the gaps of, okay, we're not actually addressing the audience we think we are, start changing that content so that it better does. Change it, measure it, see if revenue or if leads go up, and then just continue that process.
Right, right. So I'll put in a quick plug here, which is, I agree with exactly what you're saying there. And in order for me to help clients, one of the things that I did is I created this free assessment tool where they
Mhm.
just have to come to the website, bpick.com, and answer 15 questions. It doesn't cost anything. And it will give you an analysis of where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, so that you'll know, here's where I really need to start if I'm going to get out there.
Mhm.
And a second thing I tell people to do, especially if you're sort of, mostly B2C, but it could be B2B, but maybe maybe you're a landlord tenant attorney, and think about when you have the potential client that you have, maybe they're a tenant and they've been trying to get something fixed forever and they have no hot water, whatever.
Right.
Um, so they're laying in bed at 3 a.m. worrying about the fact that I took another cold shower and I'm sick and tired of it and I can't get the landlord's attention and I need to find out what to do about this. And so they go on their phone in bed, which is the worst thing to do to try and sleep, but they got so much anxiety, they got to do it anyway. Um, and they start searching. Think about what would they be searching for, and then do that search yourself
Yeah.
and see if you come up. And if you don't come up, well, there's an answer for you about your website.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree. And, especially for small firms, don't try to solve that for everything that somebody pick the 5 or 6 most important ones, and start there and get those working really well and add content so that you're being found in search for those. And then once you have those working pretty well, then add maybe a couple more if you need to. But I think a lot of times clients or small firms especially try to put way too much content on, and it just ends up creating a website that's full of confusion. That potential prospects come to your site and they can't identify themselves on it, so they don't know where to go. They don't know that you're the right fit, and they move on to somebody else.
Right. Right. All right. So someone builds a website, they take this advice into to heart, and they fix things so that they're better found and speaking to the right client the right way. But it can't just stop there. There's got to be sort of continual improvement if they're going to stay fresh and relevant, right?
Hmm.
So
Yes.
so tell us about, what does that look like when someone finally kind of puts all this into practice and now they have a good website that's doing these things. What do they have to do to maintain it?
Yeah, so continual improvement's an area that we are huge proponents of. It's a big part of how we interact with our clients. We think that it's probably more valuable than large redesigns in a lot of cases, especially if your site's not doing too poorly already. Um, and the process is pretty simple. So for us, what we do is we look at your site, we say, what are you trying to accomplish with it? What are the, are you trying to get new leads of a certain type, of a certain whatever your goals are? And then we look at the site and we say, we're not doing a good enough job in these areas to support those leads. So we spend the next 30, 60, 90 days improving that, measuring it, seeing if it works. And we just continually improve the site permanently. So it's not a build it once and then let it sit for 3 years and get old. And now it's completely serving the wrong market, right? It's the language is all for not even your current clients you're trying to find. It's constantly improving it, keeping it going, and just repeating that process, identifying where are we falling a little short on the goals that we have. What's the simplest thing we can do to help move that? Measure it, do it again, and it's often better for both because a lot of small firms they don't have time to spend completely rebuilding a website. It can be a huge process if you're starting from scratch. So by doing that little work, your agency can help you by identifying here are 3 areas you could be doing better at. Here's the small amount of effort we need from you to help us get those pages done or improved or redesigned or whatever the case might be. Push them out, measure them, do it again. It's a much lower investment from the firm, both financially and time wise, and you're starting to get better results. And it stays in line with where your business is going.
Right. Right. So if they start doing that and they start paying attention to it, what are the pros and cons of, some websites out there will have blogs. So a new article is being posted, once a week, once a month, whatever it may be. Some of them will have hook into their own podcast or their own YouTube channel. So as new content comes up, it's showing up on the website. Is there any pros or cons to doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them work well for most firms. I think the mistake that most firms make is that they try to do all of them at the same time. And so it's that classic case of trying to do too many things poorly instead of trying to do one thing really well. So, you have to know your audience. So podcast might be great for your firm. It may not be great for somebody else's firm, depending on, who your clients are or how much they need to be educated. Um, but one of those channels is probably going to be good. So again, that goes back to talking to your existing clients, figuring out, if we had a podcast, would it be of interest? Or if we had a blog, what kind of things would you want to learn about? And then just trying to put in enough effort on one of those channels long enough, say 90 days at least, um, to be able to measure whether it's having any success. Are you getting leads from it at all? And if it is, keep going. It's usually a long game. But the biggest mistake that most people make are trying to do too many of those, what we call channels. So too many blog blog posts, LinkedIn and Instagram and a podcast all at once, and none of them are consistent or well done. None of they're just a waste of time at that point. And then you get frustrated, won't do any of it. The website sits for 3 years, and then you have to start all over.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. I see that all the time. And I think, one of the most important words there was the word consistency, is that if you're going to do something, put your time and effort into doing it right and doing it consistently. Because if you're just haphazardly doing stuff, it's just, it doesn't have the impact or the effect of a consistent thing.
Yeah, and
Um,
the other thing I would say is do it even when you don't need new leads. So
right.
a lot of firms we see wait until, ooh, leads have dipped. Now we need leads fast. And that's just not gonna happen. So, if you're consistent with it, even when you're busy, those leads will keep coming. Worst case, you have to turn them away because you just don't have the capacity at the moment, or you have to try to charge a little more and maybe you're too expensive for them. But it's always better to have more leads than to try to go find them when you really need them.
Right. Absolutely. So, so what about, these days we're hearing so much information about AI, because AI, it's everywhere. It does so much. It's overwhelming. People don't even know what it does yet. So what is your advice to clients when they're talking about, and they may just generally say, "Hey, what is this AI stuff? Should I be doing something with it?" How do you answer
Yeah.
those types of questions?
Well, what we try to get them focused on is what is the outcome you're actually trying to solve. So, like, is adding AI? Are you adding it to your site because you feel like you have to? Because everybody else is doing it, or are you adding it because it's actually helping you streamline a problem, an actual problem? Because if it's not solving an actual problem, chances are it's just a distraction, and it's just going to lessen the experience that somebody has on your site. So there's nothing worse than going to your site and having the little AI chatbot that'll answer your questions, and then it can't answer your questions. I'm just going to close and go to a different firm, right? Like, you're just spending money to drive me to somebody else. Uh, what what we've found is that AI is really good at taking what you already know how to do and making it more efficient. But it's not really good at trying to solve something that you haven't figured out yet. So if you have a really good process for maybe walking through prospects on whether you are a good fit for them, AI can help with that for sure. But if you're trying to have it solve a process that you haven't figured out yet, AI is just going to make it worse, and you're just wasting time and money.
So basically, if if you were to recommend to one of your clients that they use AI because they have a process that they want to walk someone through, what does that look like? Is that like a chat bot that's asking them questions, or is it something else that's happening in the background and they don't even know it? Like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of different shapes. I think the most common, especially for like a small professional service firm, would be more of that chatbot. So what you would be doing is it would be really helpful. Let's say a law firm, you might point it at an amount of resources that you have, say a giant list of cases, or some sort of large amount of content that you might have about what you do and why you're good at it, and then AI can start to help. You can create an AI chatbot that helps you train it on that data. You basically point it to that data, and then it can answer questions for your prospects based on that data. So it's essentially a custom search engine, right, for your expertise. um, we find that for a lot of small firms, it's probably a little overkill with AI currently, because it still can get pretty expensive pretty quick. Um, but it does it, it is an increasing thing that people should be paying attention to. Um, but I think for small firms, especially, it's not necessarily really helping you in any way yet.
Yeah.
At
If
least on at least for your marketing, your website. Internally, that's a whole different game. I'm
right.
sure lawyers are using it all over the place, but
No, it reminds me of a story of something that I tried as I was learning years ago about this, and I had a website, and I had very common type of question that people would call and ask me about over and over and over again. And I had information on the website that answered that, but people just didn't read it or whatever. And my phone would ring off the hook and I'm answering the same question over, and I just didn't have the time to keep doing that. And this is pre-AI. So there was a chatbot type of thing that was very linear where you could program it to say, you know, what is your question? If your question is this, I need these three pieces of information and then I can give you the answer. So it was very straightforward. Same exact questions I would ask if you called me on the phone.
yeah,
And I'm thinking,
exactly.
great, this is going to be great. So I program the thing, I set up on the website. It's right there. As soon as you come to the website, all you got to do is answer the question it asks you and it will bring you to where you need to be. Yeah, no, not when you're working with um, the public. The public will not answer the question that's being asked. They will ask their own question. So when it says, can you tell me your name? They'll say, I want to talk to someone.
Yeah.
Hello, I want to talk to someone. Can you tell me your phone number? No, I need to talk to a human being. Thank you
No.
for that number. And it was comical. So I just had to get rid of it because uh, uh, had they just answered the question, they would have gotten the answer they wanted. But that is not the way it works out there in reality. And with AI, it's better because AI is much more interactive and you can train it all this stuff. But my point is that if they can break it, they will.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so for AI, we have some clients that use it very well, mostly for internal process type stuff, not so much in front of their clients.
yeah, and it's also funny all the people who are you talked about AI and they're very skeptical and scared or whatever, that they don't realize that pretty much everything you do today, from your banking to your anything you do, the AI is in there somewhere and in multiple places. So you're using AI all day long, every day. You just may not know it.
Yep. I
So all right. Well, we are at the end of our time here, but I do want to ask sort of a final question here. And my question is this: what is the biggest digital mistake that you see firms make that they could fix today without even having to spend any money?
Analytics, for sure. So I think most people know of Google Analytics. It's a free service that Google provides. There's some other better ones or additional ones that provide some more information. Microsoft has one called Clarity, which is similar to Google Analytics, but it also gives you a lot more actual insight on like where people are getting stuck on your page. For example, if people are, what they call rage clicking buttons, which is like you're clicking something and it doesn't do anything. Um, those tools are great, and they provide you with they're both free, and they provide you with a lot of insights on who's coming to your site and what they're doing and why they're leaving. So those are great tools. And then to your point earlier of, AI is everywhere. If somebody's using, say, ChatGPT or Claude, they have the chat tool on their computer, you can talk to those analytics tools. So you don't have to be a data scientist anymore to understand them. You can just ask Claude, hey, look at Microsoft Clarity. What's going on our site? What can we do to maybe streamline this process? Or what does this data mean? And you don't have to understand it yourself. And all of that is free. And I think that gives you the insight on, okay, now you know what's wrong with the site. Now you can go start a continual improvement process of trying to improve that, remove those pain points, and just, keep doing that until your site's performing the way you want it to.
Fantastic. That's a great tip. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the fact that it's free and readily available is just, a great starting place. So thank you for that tip. So if a listener wanted to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
And so our website, oddly enough, would be the best place. That's lightburn.co.
Okay. And if they call you, are you going to answer the phone?
They call me, I will answer the phone. Yes.
Just had to check.
We do
All
we do
right.
it for
Well, I want to thank the listeners for listening to another episode of the BPIC podcast. I want to remind you that we do have that free assessment tool available on the BPIC website, which is www.be-picked.com. It'll give you a lot of insight as to what Scott was talking about today and the things you might need help with. And he's certainly, obviously, a great trained resource to help you with those things. So don't be afraid to give him a call or check his website. And I'm happy to announce that my new book, which is called Left of Trust, is available for pre-order on Amazon now. So don't be afraid to take a look at that. You can find that at our website as well. And every week we drop a new podcast with great information, great guests, and things that will help you build your business. So be sure to listen in again next week. We will see you then. Visit us, bepicked.com. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. Thank you.